So let's talk about uncomfortable subject, which is collapsing deals. So yes, it happens even after firm. And so just want to do a video that kind of elaborates on the few different things and lets you know what information we require to be able to handle the different scenarios. So there's kind of a few main scenarios. So the one is a pending deal that they non-waive. Plain and simple, it's point in time. If the conditions were due by X date and they haven't waived by that time, even if they're non-responsive, which has happened, there's lots of weird stuff going on these days, then that deal's dead. And you'd have to, even if you receive a waiver signed before that, but you don't receive it till after, that deal's still dead. So that's a loophole in there that you don't want to leave open. They could claim right up to closing date, everyone's planning to go ahead, and then right up to a closing date, they can say, no, we changed our mind, we don't want to close, and they're legally able to do that. So make sure the timing is important there. In those scenarios, you would just rewrite a fresh contract, and the key thing to remember with that, writing the fresh contract, is to make sure there's a term related to deposits, transferring the deposit from contract number, on the first one, 1, 2, 3, to contract number on the second one, 2, 3, 4. So you want to make sure that that's referenced to transfer the deposit. Otherwise, we technically have to return the deposit to the client and have them resubmit a deposit on the new deal because the deposit is specific to the offer and the contract. Make sense? So the other scenario is where we have a firm deal. Whether or not we have deposits, so those are the two kind of main scenarios. So the deal's firm, everyone's removed conditions, it's sold, right? Scenario one is the deposits are due after that, and some people are negotiating deals that way these days with kind of not much or no good faith money up front. We don't recommend that, especially in a kind of changing market. You want to make sure the buyer's got some validity to them up front. But you can do first deposit, or maybe you have the only deposit due after removal of conditions. So deals firm, it's sold, but you don't have the deposit. So a reminder about the seller's right to void the contract. So up until the deposit due date, the seller does not have that option. So whenever you make that due date is important. After the deposit due date, the seller reserves the right to void the contract. They cannot then sue, they can't go after damages, they can't go after any costs because they're just voiding it like it didn't exist. So the key to remember with that dynamic is exactly that. There's no, remedies that they can seek for compensation after the fact. They just kill the deal and could now negotiate or go into a fresh deal if they wanted to. And in that case, you need to submit that paperwork to the office. It's a general notice that you use, signed by your seller, giving that notice to the buyer's agent that the seller is now voiding the contract due to that term. So you'd reference the term on the seller void option because they had not received the deposit by the due date. Again, importance of getting confirmations on deposits. We have that in a separate video. So the second scenario is you've got the deposit, we're holding 10, 20 grand, whatever it is, and hopefully enough to protect everybody, not $1,000 deposit, and they don't close. So possession, up until possession, even if they're telling you in advance that they're not going to close or not able to close for whatever the reason may be, contractually they have until close date. So lawyers need to handle that. After the fact, what we need from the lawyer, our clients, so if it's a seller's deal, seller side deal, we rep the seller. We need the seller's lawyer at minimum to communicate to us. They generally have a template letter that states that the buyer was unable to complete, and thus we will return the deposit to the seller's lawyer, our mutual client's lawyer, and they'll distribute according to the agreement. Important note on that, if you aren't aware, in your seller rep agreement, there's the term that you as the listing agent can receive a portion of that deposit up to a maximum of your commission because you did your job. You sold the house. The buyer's the one that didn't complete. And so you need to communicate with the office when you send that notice in and the lawyer that, hey, this deal's died, you need to inform us. We'll double check with you. Trust me, that's a key thing that staff are trained on. But we need to know if you want that commission held back or not. So, we always encourage you. You did your job. You got paid. Maybe you give them a bit of a break on reselling it or something like that. But some agents, the nature of the dynamic with their client relationship is they don't want to charge the client. They just want to give them the full proceeds of the deposit. And then they go about relisting it, getting it back active. We cannot relist it active, just change it from sold to active without that paperwork. So hopefully that's clear. Also, natural expiry. So if you had possession and that possession date is within the time of the original listing agreement, so the expiry date, it's earlier than the expiry date, then you can go back active on the original listing. If it's after that listing expired, So we need to do a fresh listing, and you would relist it after the deal collapsed. We would mark it as a collapsed transaction, would change from sold to collapsed in MLS, and then you would do a new fresh listing, so that history would be in the MLS listing. So if you represent on the buy side and your buyer is unable to complete, that's sort of a different scenario. So again, talk to the buyer's lawyer. They're going to hopefully negotiate with the seller. The thing to remember is their liability doesn't stop with the deposit amount. If that seller ends up incurring other costs, damages, maybe they end up reselling it for a lesser price than your buyer was paying, the seller could sue your buyer for damage for all of that. So know that their risk does not end with their deposit, but they've for sure lost their deposit in that scenario if they didn't close. And again, we recommend, endorse the fact that they have to speak to their lawyer. They need independent legal advice in those dynamics. We cannot advise. You should not advise. You can give them options, but most of the part should be speak to your lawyer. At that point in the transaction, you got to talk to your lawyer. So hopefully that clears up those tough situations, but we're here to support you always in good deals and bad deals, when things don't go as planned. It's all about informing your client of their options and then helping them get the result they're looking for. So let us know if you have any questions, and we're always here for you.